Royal love is supposed to be controlled, distant, rehearsed. Every glance measured. Every gesture approved. Every emotion filtered. And yet, somewhere between the silence and the spotlight, something doesn't follow the rules. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, have never been the loudest couple in the room. No dramatic declarations. No performative affection. But recently, the cameras have started catching something else. A hand that lingers a second too long. A touch that wasn't meant to be seen. Moments so small, they almost disappear, unless you're paying attention. Because what if the real story of their relationship was never spoken? What if it was only ever revealed? For years, their relationship has existed in a space most people overlooked. Not because it lacked depth, but because it never tried to prove itself. There were no exaggerated displays, no carefully staged romance designed for headlines. Just quiet presence. Consistent, almost invisible. Publicly, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, were often seen as composed, even distant. A perfect royal image, polished and restrained. But perception can be misleading. Because when you slow everything down, when you watch the pauses, the glances, the subtle shifts, you begin to notice something else entirely. The truth isn't in grand gestures. It's hidden in what most people miss. Micromoments, revealing macrotruths. And in recent years, especially between 2025 and 2026, those moments have become harder to ignore. Not because they changed, but because the world finally started paying attention. This isn't just a story about love. It's about learning how to see it. It happened in a place defined by tradition, where every movement carries weight and history watches closely. Commonwealth Day at Westminster Abbey. A setting where royal behavior is expected to be precise, restrained, almost ceremonial. Catherine arrived in striking royal blue. The structure of her coat dress was flawless, her presence composed, every detail echoing the image of a future queen. Beside her, Prince William stood in quiet formality. But then something shifted. For just a few seconds, Catherine reached out and placed her arm around William's waist. It was subtle, almost fleeting. But in that world, it was everything. Because that moment wasn't choreographed. It wasn't required. And it certainly wasn't typical. Royal couples don't do this. Not here, not like this. And yet they did. The reaction was immediate. It's not royal, it's real, one observer wrote. Experts later described it as ownership of emotional space. A quiet, instinctive claim of closeness. Not for the cameras. Not for approval. Just natural. And that's exactly why it mattered. Just days later, during a formal engagement at Windsor, the pattern continued. But this time, it felt even more instinctive. Catherine stepped out in a refined gray coat dress, her look quietly layered with meaning. The pearl earrings she wore once belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales. A subtle bridge between past and present, memory and identity. But again, it wasn't the outfit that held attention. As they moved together, Prince William placed his hand gently on Catherine's back. Not briefly, not formally, but with intention. It wasn't guiding in the traditional sense, it was grounding. A quiet signal. I'm here. The moment spread quickly. Viewers began noticing something deeper. Not just this gesture, but how often it appeared. Consistent. Unforced. Almost automatic. And that's what made it powerful. Experts describe this as emotional responsiveness. The ability to instinctively attune to your partner. Then came a moment shaped not by celebration, but by quiet resilience. At the VE Day Remembrance Ceremony, the atmosphere carried both history and gravity. The setting was formal, the expectations familiar. But beneath the surface, something felt different. Catherine appeared poised as always. Yet there was a subtle fragility. An awareness that this appearance came during a period that hadn't been easy. Nothing was said directly. It didn't need to be. As they moved into position, Prince William stayed close. His hand returned to her back. This time more deliberate, more steady. When he guided her toward her seat, the gesture lingered just a little longer, as if grounding her in the moment. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't visible to everyone. But it carried weight. Experts describe this as protective anchoring. A quiet form of support where physical presence becomes reassurance. Not to lead, not to control, but to stabilize. In a moment shaped by pressure, his actions said what words never could. He wasn't just beside her. He was holding the moment. With her ata spring garden party inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere was light, almost effortless. Catherine arrived in soft yellow, elegant, understated, familiar. But the real detail wasn't the dress. It was the earrings. The same pair she had worn on her wedding day. A choice so subtle, it could easily be missed. Yet for those paying attention, it felt intentional, like a quiet echo of where everything began. No annoncement. No explanation. Just a message hidden in plain sight. Experts often describe this as storytelling through jewelry, where personal history is woven into public appearance, turning fashion into memory. And beside her, Prince William seemed to respond in kind. His body angled toward her, again and again, even in conversation with others. A pattern seen too often to be coincidence. He wasn't just standing next to her. He was oriented toward her, as if no matter the setting she rema. Not every moment unfolded beneath chandeliers or ceremony. On a quiet Valentine's Day in 2025, the setting felt almost ordinary. Open air, relaxed clothing, no formal staging. Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat beside Prince William, not as public figures, but as something far more familiar. And then, without warning, it happened. William leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. No hesitation. No performance. Just a simple, human gesture. Soft, natural, real. The image spread quickly, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Viewers around the world responded to what felt like controlled authenticity. A moment intimate enough to feel genuine, yet still grounded in quiet composure. For a couple so often defined by restraint, this glimpse behind the curtain carried unusual weight. Because for a second, the titles disappeared, and what remained felt completely real. Even in the most formal settings, where every step is choreographed, something unguarded still finds its way through. At the Royal Variety performance, the world waited outside. Cameras ready, lights fixed, expectations set. But the moment that mattered happened before any of that. Inside the car, just seconds before stepping into view, Prince William reached for Catherine's hand and gently lifted it toward his lips. Not quite a kiss. Not quite a gesture meant for anyone else. It was quick. Almost instinctive. And that's exactly why it felt different. Because it didn't seem designed to be seen. When the footage surfaced, reactions were immediate. People described it as a glimpse behind the curtain. The kind of intimacy that exists when no one is supposed to be watching. In a world built on appearances, this moment raised a quiet question. What's real is often what was never meant to be public. Long before the world began watching, their story was already unfolding, quietly, almost unnoticed. It started at the University of St. Andrews, where Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, built something that didn't need an audience. There were no grand declarations, no public displays, just a steady, unspoken connection. Even during their brief separation in 2007, that foundation didn't disappear. When they found their way back to each other, it felt less like a reunion and more like a continuation. By the time of their 2010 engagement interview, the dynamic was already clear. As Catherine spoke, William's attention rarely drifted. He leaned in slightly, his focus fixed, not performative, not exaggerated, just present. Psychologists would later call this anchored attention, a subtle but powerful sign of emotional investment. Then came 2011, inside Westminster Abbey. The world watched the ceremony, the vows, the historic kiss. But beyond the spectacle, there was something quieter. A glance. A softened expression. A moment that passed quickly, but lingered. Even then, the pattern was already there. Not loud. Not staged. Just consistent. As the years moved forward, their relationship didn't shift in public intensity, it deepened in rhythm. By 2012, during the 2012 London Olympics, something subtle became visible. In crowded arenas and unpredictable moments, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, naturally gravitated toward each other. Small exchanges. Quiet smiles. Brief words spoken away from attention. During the Australia and New Zealand tour, that ease became even more visible. Catherine laughed openly during unplanned moments, while William consistently turned toward her, almost instinctively. Experts later described this as default orientation, a behavioral pattern where partners unconsciously face each other as a sign of trust and alignment. By 2020, during the uncertainty of the pandemic, their connection took on a different form. When all these moments are placed side by side, a pattern begins to emerge, not of grand romance, but of repetition. Small behaviors, repeated across years, across settings, across pressure. The same quiet touch. The same natural orientation. The same instinctive closeness between Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Not as performance, but as habit. This is a love language built on protection, attention, and awareness. Where care is not announced, it is demonstrated. Where presence is not loud, it is consistent. And that consistency matters. In a world of highly visible, often performative celebrity relationships, their dynamic stands apart. Not because it is more dramatic, but because it is less so. Subtlety in their case becomes proof. Not absence of emotion, but refinement of it. Experts often describe this contrast as consistency over intensity. Intensity fades. Consistency remains. And what we are seeing is not a collection of isolated gestures. It is a long-term emotional system. Quiet, stable, and deeply synchronized. In the end, nothing about their story depends on noise. No declarations. No spectacle. Just a steady presence that never asks to be noticed, but somehow always is. For Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, love isn't something performed for the world. It's something built in silence, proven in repetition, and revealed in the smallest of gestures. That's why people connect with them. Not because they are distant royalty, but because their connection feels recognizably human. Familiar in its restraint, powerful in its consistency. Because real love doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in a look, a touch, a quiet instinct to stay close when it matters most. And maybe that's the final truth behind everything we've seen. Real love isn't loud. It's constant.